Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Shrikar Rajendran.
I'm Anish Gupta.
So this is our first episode, amidst this quarantine. We're in California, so kind of hunkered down in our houses right now. So we're trying to work this out. We're on Zoom right now, just trying to get you out some more episodes. And today we're going to be grading each team's off-season so far from the AFC and NFC East. Shrikar, what team you want to start with?
Let's start with the Bills. With Tom Brady leaving New England, the AFC East is more uncertain than ever. And the Bills, they just seized the opportunity to become the new favorite in the division. The headliner is the trade for Stephon Diggs. It wasn't a steal. They paid for him with their 2020 first-round pick and 3 other selections. He does, however, fill the need they likely would have used the pick on. He'll provide Josh Allen with a true number 1 wide receiver as that Bills offense tries to improve upon its 26th ranked passing attack.
Yeah, I liked the trade. I think they maybe gave up a little bit too much for Diggs because we saw what it took to get DeAndre Hopkins. But I also like some of their other signings. They signed Quentin Jefferson. Mario Addison is is an old guy now, but he's good. And for a 1-year deal, I see no problem with that. They signed Gerald Williams from the Panthers, who a couple years ago was one of the best guards in the league. They did a lot of things.
I also like the signing of Vernon Butler.
Yeah.
I think Josh Norman was interesting too. I mean, the Bills are a team that they're kind of a grit and grind team, and I think they added to that with these signings. And the trade for Diggs, I think they did. I agree with Jack. They did give up a bit too much. But if you look in the long run, I think they needed a playmaker that could give you consistent production because John Brown was their best receiver, and I don't think he's that as reliable as someone like Stephon Diggs, who had to step up.
And he's not a number 1.
Yeah.
John Brown or Diggs?
John Brown.
Yeah, I think Diggs can be because, like I said, he stepped up when Thielen was hurt this year, and he was able to give them consistent production.
What I wonder though is the type of community they have in Buffalo is one where no player really complains about their playing time. No player complains about getting the ball. It's just the way they run it over there. McDermott does a great job of the locker room. I just hope that Diggs doesn't come in and change that aspect of the Buffalo Bills because I think that's what makes them who they are.
I think that's a good point, but I think also Diggs isn't competing with anyone on this team. I think everyone knows he's the number 1 option, and I think he knows too that he's in a place where the culture. I feel like the Bills culture is just. I mean, the Vikings have a good one, but I think the Bills have a better one here. And I think though Josh Allen does have some accuracy issues, I think he has a lot more upside than Kirk Cousins does.
Yeah, Jack kind of touched on this already, but most of the other key investments they made were in that defense. They were already 4th in yards allowed per play last season. That's already good. And with Allen on his rookie deal and several other key players yet to be extended, the Bills had a ton of cap room. And I think they did well to resist spending too much of it, and they got guys who will make a difference next fall. Mario
on
Addison,
decent deals too.
Yeah, Mario Addison, he will be 33 in September, but he has no fewer than 9 sacks in each of the last 4 seasons. So I don't know where we're going there, but I think he should be good for that D-line. They did lose Jordan Phillips, so Vernon Butler and Quentin Jefferson will more than make up for the loss of him on the inside. And the Bills already had the 4th-ranked secondary, so bringing in Josh Norman on a 1-year deal, that just makes their ceiling even higher, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just a prove-it deal. That's what it is. They have a lot of guys here that really match the identity of the Bills. It's guys that aren't the biggest name players, but they'll get the job done. And that's what McDermott needs, especially on defense. He got more of them. I think Quentin Jefferson is one of my favorite signings of the entire offseason. I think he really flew under the radar, and they got him on a deal that's really good money-wise for who else was in free agency. I think the Bills did a great job. I'd probably give him an A-.
I think that's a good grade to give. I would give him – I think a B+ or an A- would be a fitting grade here, depending on how you want to look at it. I think the signing of Quentin Jefferson is based on the lines of him and Mario Addison. I think with the loss of Kyle Williams, you do want that presence on the line just to anchor your defense. And I think those two are big helps there. And I think that's why I would give him a B+, A-. I mean, whichever one you think about. I mean, if you want to lean favorites, I think A- just because of how they were able to acquire Diggs. And I think he's a perfect fit for them schematically, just because of how versatile he can be.
I agree with you guys. I'm going to give him an A-. The Bills had dueling missions this offseason. On one hand, I think they needed to make enough upgrades to give themselves a chance to win their division for the first time since I think 95. I'm going to
It's
assume.
been a while, yeah. I believe
Yeah.
it's around 95, 96.
And
But
on
I
the
think,
other,
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
on the other, they needed to save the money it's going to take to bring back like those foundational pieces such as Tre'Davious White, Josh Allen,
Yep.
Deion Dawkins. All their contracts are all set to expire in the next couple of years.
Jordan
Trading
Poyer,
for
I believe, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trading for Diggs checks a big box, and the additions to the defense should ensure Buffalo doesn't take a step back in 2020.
Yeah,
So I got a question for you guys about the running game. What do you think? Do you think Devin Singletary can step up and
He has
be
a
that
lot of
kind of number one?
potential. I think as long as that offensive line stays intact, I think he can be a threat in that offense. I like his speed too.
Yeah, with now having Diggs and John Brown, being able to fortify the pass game will really set up Singletary to be able to run the ball. But I also think that Singletary is really valuable as a pass catcher.
That's what I was thinking. But like, I don't know if he can run in between the tackles, and that's why I think the Bills should think of taking maybe a J.K. Dobbins or someone who can kind of be that power running back in the draft. I mean, obviously they don't have their first round pick, but they can definitely use a second rounder on one of them.
I can see that. I'd like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU to the Bills. I think that'd be a pretty good fit to match with Singletary in that backfield.
What about Devonta Freeman? What do you guys think about that?
That'd be an interesting one.
It would be interesting, but I think they want to lean. I think you want to lean towards the draft if you want a running back.
Yeah, I think
it's a bit risky.
I think in terms of Freeman, we'll be talking about this later, but I think you'd be a good fit on the Falcons. But yeah, that's a story for another day.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Dolphins. I mean, they struck big in a lot of deals. They made Byron Jones the highest paid corner. They got Kyle Van Noy, Jordan Howard, Shaq Lawson, and Eric Flowers. They made a lot of big deals, which is the main problem I have with their offseason. I think they made way too many deals for the position they're in right now. If you look at what the Jets did last year, they signed a lot of huge contracts when they really weren't at a position to compete for the playoffs yet. And it really came back to bite them in the butt. And I think that that's what the Dolphins did this year. They still don't have a quarterback in place. They've got one good receiver. They've got just a lot of holes. And going out and signing all these humongous contracts isn't going to solve all that in 1 year.
Well, let's see. The Dolphins, they came into free agency with more money to spend than any other team, and they chose to invest heavily in defense. Brian Flores, a former defensive coordinator, leaned into his New England roots with the acquisition of Kyle Van Noy. And Miami brought in Emmanuel Ogbah and Shaq Lawson as well. Yeah, you're right. The Dolphins' flashiest signing was Byron Jones. They paid out big money to get their own lockdown corner and improve their pass defense. The offense wasn't as big of a priority, but I think Miami still made moves to bring it up to speed. Jordan Howard gives the Dolphins a power back after options at the position became thin for them last year. Eric Flowers redeemed some of his value as a guard last season with Washington, but I think the Dolphins may have overspent on him. They can afford to do that, though, with all the cap space they had this offseason.
I think they definitely overpaid some guys, but like the only bad signing I saw was Eric Flowers. I think he did play well at guard, but also, I mean, Haskins was still constantly pressured, and I think they weren't able to show true progression with that line. I think they did overpay for some guys, and which is natural with all that cap space. I think the only but like a lot of them aren't, long-term deals. Like these are, I'm seeing a lot of 2-year deals, like Ogbah. I mean, Shaq Lawson's a 3-year deal, but I think that was a decent amount of money that they gave him. I mean, Eric Flowers was the only one that was iffy. Again, Jordan Howard, 2-year deal. I mean, Byron Jones, when you guys think about it, ever since he made the switch to corner, he's been pretty productive, especially man-to-man. And I think this team, and plus they do have Talib, so we can't forget that. So I think that tandem is actually pretty good. And I think they did go 5-4 down the stretch, right? With the team that they had before. And none of these guys I see are, big name guys who want to be the star or want, to be the main guy on the team. These guys still emulate the Dolphins culture, which is much similar to the Bills and even the Patriots with Bill Belichick a few years ago. I think these signings were pretty good, and I think they still have a lot of cap space. Think about it. They still have 14 picks this year's draft, and they can obviously use them. They could trade down and get more picks later. They can trade down and give up some bad contracts that they have. They have a lot of potential with this team, and I honestly think that they could very well surprise people and do well this season. I think they have the pieces, and I still think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a very serviceable quarterback. I think he's honestly a top 2 quarterback in that division right now. as of right now. I mean, obviously we need to see how Darnold progresses, but I think as of right now, Fitzpatrick has looked good.
See, the problem with the offseason that I have with the Dolphins is I don't think they're in a position to compete yet. They don't have either tackle spot really filled. They don't have a quarterback at the moment. They are signing all these big contracts in 1 year, assuming they can compete. But I don't think that that's what they should be doing. I think they should have gradually moved and spent their money over a couple of years to compete once they have all the pieces in place, especially in a free agent class next year that is so stacked.
I think that's a good point, but they didn't go all in the sense that they gave up their entire cap space. They still have a lot left. They still have all their picks. So they're going to have an acquisition of young talent as well as veteran presence. And not only that, I don't get what the problem is with Fitzpatrick. I really don't see, like, honestly, they should, if they draft a quarterback, they should redshirt him for a year because Fitzpatrick has won some big games.
The problem with Fitzpatrick is he's inconsistent.
Okay, but
he's
the
old.
last game but the last 9 games he played, he went 5-4. And he did look really good in those games. And on the last 5-4 is a pretty good record considering the schedule they had in the last 9
But
games.
is it better than Darnold? Look, Darnold's super talented. We'll get into the Jets later, but
I'm not comparing. I mean, if we were to compare him to Darnold has way more potential. But as of right now, I would take Fitzpatrick. And the reason saying is because he's more mobile, which is really weird saying. But, I mean, he's shown he can run with his legs.
Fitzpatrick is not more mobile than Sam Darnold is.
He led the league. Yeah, he led the Dolphins in rushing, and I think, and he did use his legs more in the final half of the season than that allowed him to get those wins because a lot of those he did use his legs in those wins. And I think Fitzpatrick is still serviceable. I don't know why everyone's saying like they have to start Tua right away if they draft him, or they have to start Herbert, whoever they get.
They don't need to.
I think exactly. They should.
Sure, he's serviceable, but are you going to build your whole team around him? I don't think so.
No, that's my point. They have 3 first-round picks, so they can use one on a tackle. They can use one on a cornerback, whatever need they have.
I agree with that.
Running back. They can literally redshirt the quarterback that they give. They spend their first-round pick on. And Fitzpatrick is again. I'm fine with him as my starting quarterback for this year. If I'm the Dolphins, I'm fine with that. If he really does bad, right? One, they haven't gotten rid of Josh Rosen yet, so he's still reliable. I mean, I really don't like him in that system. I honestly think they've just done him dirty with the Cardinals and the Dolphins. I mean, he just really hasn't had a real chance, but they still have him. And if they have Tua, they can maybe throw him in there. If they use Herbert, I mean, both of them are fine in my opinion. I think they could do well in the NFL, but like I said, they're not building around Fitzpatrick. They're building around their 14 picks that they have this year in the draft.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give a grade. I'm going to give the Dolphins I'm going to give them a solid A. Because, the Dolphins figured to be one of the biggest spenders in free agency, and I don't think they disappointed. It's easy to like where they spent their money too, because after sporting one of the league's worst defenses at pressuring the quarterback last year, they got multiple players who can help them get after passers in 2020. And the defense should be much improved after these signings, and Miami still has 3 first-round picks to fix the offense. So I'm just going to go ahead and give them a solid A.
I totally agree with that. I was literally going to give them an A, solid A. I think they made some great acquisitions. I agree they did overspend in some areas, like I mentioned earlier, but this team, I honestly could see them maybe having a winning season this year. I mean, the AFC East is wide open, and they've shown they can win big games, obviously against New England last year. And this team, I mean, Brian Flores is really a player's coach, and I really see them, they rally around that guy. And I can really see them having a great year this year.
I wasn't as impressed by the offseason, of course, but I just think that everyone gets caught up in the big name signings and the people who go out and spend the most money. And I think that would work for other kinds of teams. But right now, I just don't think the Dolphins should have spent this much money in an offseason. I like some of their signings. Kyle Van Noy, I thought was one of the best signings of the offseason, but Eric Flowers isn't good. And Shaq Lawson was kind of seen as a bust. And I think they paid some guys too much in positions that they could easily get next year and that they should gradually build up over time. But you guys did a little bit to convince me to give him a better grade. I was going to give him a B. I was kind of leaning towards B from B+, but I'll go B+ for the Dolphins this offseason.
I think just keep in mind before we move on to the next team, just keep in mind that Eric Flowers did a lot better as a guard. Because think about it, he was considered one of the biggest busts at tackle in the last 10, 20 years. So he has looked better. And also they didn't spend on very big names. Not everyone knows who Shaq Lawson is. Not even everyone knows who Kyle Van Noy is. And I think Jordan Howard was a great addition. We didn't even talk about him that much, but think about it. This dude had 2 1,000-yard seasons his first 2 years in the league. And there's really no other competition for him in Miami because I think he's not a running back that should go with running back by committee. That wasn't good with in the
Philly.
Eagles system, and even in Chicago with I'm forgetting Tariq Cohen. So I think now he's going to be the true running back for the Dolphins, and I think he's going to have a pretty good year.
All right.
All right, so let's move on.
Let's move on to New England. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. The loss of Tom Brady was obviously a big deal. More than anything, New England, they're losing the continuity and stability of having the same quarterback for 20 years. But they also took big losses on the defense too. Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, Danny Shelton, Deron Harmon, they were all key contributors to one of the league's best defenses. Devin McCourty will be back. He's 32 years old, but he's still playing at a high level. That move was key for, the continued play of what was a good defensive backfield. New England did also get Adrian Phillips to help bolster the secondary and I think presumably replace Harmon. Tagging Joe Thuney allowed the Pats to keep one of the best guard combinations in the league, in my opinion, with Shaq Mason. That will be important as they try to protect their new quarterback. Instead of getting in on free agent options such as, the Cam Newtons, the Jameis Winstons, New England brought back Brian Hoyer. He will at least provide a veteran option if Jarrett Stidham doesn't perform well.
Yeah,
I think the Patriots. Go ahead. All
right, I think that they returned three of the most important parts of their team in McCourty, Thuney, and then they also re-signed Matthew Slater, the special teams just wizard that's helped them win or get better in countless games. I think they did a really good job, but the problem is they just lost so many guys. I think they signed the right people back because obviously they couldn't bring back everyone, but they lost just so much off that defense. And when you lose the greatest quarterback of all time, there's no way you can have a positive outlook on your season or your offseason.
Mm-hmm. I think for the Patriots, I totally agree with you guys were saying. I mean, Thuney was a good bringing him back was good. Thuney and Mason are very good guard combo. I mean, all the players. So Bill Belichick has been known for getting rid of players a year early rather than a year too late. So all these guys that he's getting rid of, like if I were to trust any coach in the league, I would trust Bill Belichick with my entire season. He just knows like how the NFL works before like anyone else does. He just knows how like what to do and when to do it. Obviously, we always question them, and it always like just bites us in the butt like later when we just were proven wrong constantly. I mean, as of right now, I do not like what they've been doing though, because I think Brady was a big identity for them, and I think Bill Belichick, now that he has a lot more control to this team than he has, I think he's looking to go younger, because I mean, why else could you explain getting rid of these players who have been very serviceable for you over the last few years? I mean, yeah, you brought back Brian Hoyer as like veteran presence. I really think they should go after, a Cam Newton or an Andy Dalton or maybe even Jameis Winston. I really think they should, because think about it, these fans in New England are going to be hungry for someone that can, get them back to the top. Like, what have they been seeing the past 20 years? Just pure level of consistency and something that has never happened in the NFL. And now that the GOAT is essentially gone from their system, I think they have the pieces in place to still do well. Like, they still have a great O-line. They still have some serviceable receivers, and they can obviously get some in the draft. They still have their secondary that was the top secondary last year, right? Their defense still has their main playmakers. And I think they should really look to getting one of those serviceable quarterbacks, because Andy Dalton can still play. And I am a firm believer that Cam Newton can still play as well. And even guys like Josh Rosen and Jameis Winston, they've shown signs of doing well. So I think they really should go out and get one of these guys rather than looking to go young with Stidham or even with Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, so I was prepared to give the Patriots an F just because of all they lost, but I think they really salvaged that. No, they salvaged that with a lot of their re-signs. I think they re-signed the right people. If they had brought back Brady, we would have a very big, a different conversation on our hands. I'm going to give them a C just because you can't look past all they lost. But I think they did a good job to salvage that based off bringing back Thuney, bringing back McCourty, bringing back some of these other small name guys. And I think just a couple more signings or draft pieces, and we'll see a team that isn't far off from where they were last year, because last year they still weren't a very good roster. They didn't have the most. I
would never. I can't bet against Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
So I literally I wrote down C as well. I think, I mean, I wasn't leaning anything below that. If anything, this was kind of a harsh grade because of the players that just because of the whole culture that Brady took away with him when he left. I think the Patriots, everyone's gonna even in their locker room, they're gonna be like, who do we look to? And I think Bill Belichick's gonna have a little bit of a problem on his hands, but he has done this before. I mean, Brady was injured for the entire year one time, and they did go 11-5 with Matt Castle. So he's shown that he can do this. And I think the roster is still great. There are still some great pieces on this team. And, they're not really falling behind in the cap. They still have some good draft picks. I mean, they still have that. They still have the potential to be a great team in the AFC East.
Yeah, you guys gave him C's. I'm going to go around that range, probably a C- for me. I'm not going to be as generous because there isn't a whole lot of long-term value in this free agency class for the Patriots because Tooney has yet to sign beyond this one-year franchise tag, and Hoyer is certainly not a solution at quarterback. Yep. But I think we all know the Brady era was never going to last forever. And while it's difficult to label the Patriots a rebuilding team after years of Super Bowl contention, these moves they made this offseason certainly make them look like they're tearing down to probably, shape a new identity.
Yeah. So how about we move on to the Jets, last team in the AFC East? I wasn't a big fan early in this offseason period, but I think they did a good job bringing back the right people and fixing the offensive line at least partially. Like I really liked bringing back Poole and Jenkins. Like I said on the previous episode, I think those were the two guys I really wanted back. And then I really liked the signings of McGovern and Perriman. I thought that signing Perriman really helped after losing Anderson because going into a season with Jamison Crowder and Josh Doxson as your two receivers would have been awful.
Yeah, the Jets needed to address the offensive line this offseason. They haven't done a good job of protecting Sam Darnold in his 2 seasons. They allowed 63 sacks in his first 26 games. That's horrible. And keeping him upright should be priority number 1 next season. They invested heavily to do just that. They signed George Fant and Connor McGovern for a combined 60 mil, 57 mil, something around that over the next 3 years. McGovern was an easy signing to like since he was solid in pass protection for the Broncos. Fant, on the other hand, was a swing tackle in Seattle, and trusting him as a full-time starter will be a leap of faith, in my opinion. Brian Poole was a bright spot for the Jets secondary in the slot, so bringing him back on a reasonable deal was a good move. Jordan Jenkins was another important re-signing. He led the team in sacks last season with 8 and I think 15 over the past 2 seasons, so I like those moves too.
I mean, for the Jets, I think I've told you guys this before. My problem with their signings was you can't rebuild the entire O-line in a year. No teams have tried and it's always failed. It's always failed. You can't. I think they've had at least 4. I think they've had 4 signings in their O-line, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah,
and also they're probably going to draft a tackle in the first round. So essentially, that's 5 new players on the offensive line. That is a huge transition after a year of spending on it, right? They did invest a little bit. I think they was it Matt Khalil or Ryan Khalil, one of the two that they signed towards the end.
Ryan.
Yeah, so they've shown interest in the O-line for the past few years. Obviously, they haven't been able to salvage the O-line that had Nick Mangold as their leader, but I think I didn't like that they invested heavily in the O-line in the sense that they gave cheap deals to guys that haven't been consistent. I think Connor McGovern was the best signing that they had, but in regards Greg Van Roten, I just don't see him being a consistent piece. I don't see this O-lineman gelling together.
I thought Greg Van Roten was another solid addition. He gave up only 1 sack with the Panthers last season, I'm pretty sure. I think that was a good.
But he was working alongside Trey Turner. Also, there was I think the Panthers ran the ball a lot more than they passed, so I think it was a bit of a hidden kind of inflated stat. But I agree, it's not a bad signing at all. But my point is, it's hard to rebuild the O-line and just like that. And it's going to be even hard for Sam Darnold too to communicate with all these guys that he's just getting in just in a span of a month. And also with this whole COVID-19 outbreak, right? He's not going to have as much time to kind of, build that chemistry with them, right? I think we can all agree there. And I think the other side of Poole and Jenkins, I love the signing of Jenkins. I think he's a really great young player who has a lot of upside. Perryman was, I think, my favorite signing because when I watched him towards the end of the year, I thought he was amazing, filling in for what was it? I believe Chris Godwin who got hurt. And though he was never able to give this consistent production in Baltimore or in Cleveland, I mean, I think for the Bucs he was able to do it. And I think Sam Darnold is. I don't know if he's a better passer than Jameis Winston, like in terms of like just like consistent throwing, but I think it could be seen as an upgrade. I think Sam Darnold will find him the ball a lot more than Jameis Winston could. So I think he can develop into a number one. He's still young. I think he's a great addition.
Yeah, the main thing I liked about the offseason for the Jets that a lot of people aren't talking about is the way that Joe Douglas has gone after the free agents. There are a lot of one-year deals and a lot of deals where the restructuring can easily make them into one-year deals and players can be easily cut after a year. Because I think if Adam Gase messes up this year, Joe Douglas will be moving on. Gase will get fired, and Douglas will be able to restart this entire thing over with a clean slate and do an entire rebuild that he wants to do, which I think is just a great move. And all these one-year deals are essentially prove-it deals for players, and they can easily be moved on from in case there's a bad season this year.
I have mixed feelings about the one-year deals. Like, just a quick note on that, because on the one hand, yeah, you're right. They can easily kind of restart it if it looks really bad like even in the first 8 games, they can move on during the trade deadline. But my problem with that is it's, again, a similar pattern. Like last year, they kind of made a lot of additions, didn't work out. What are they doing now? Resetting. It's this whole pattern that you can't get into. And I think sometimes you do have to bite the bullet and go for these 3-4 year deals, because in the end they could pay off in the long term. And I think the Jets are looking for this short-term success that will lead them to long-term success. And I think that's a formula that it's a high risk, high reward. And I think it's a lot of a higher risk there.
All right, I'll start by giving out the grades.
Yep.
So I'm going to give him a C+. I think that's fair because, the Jets may have been hesitant after making big moves in last season's free agency period. They made no Le'Veon Bell or CJ Mosley type signings in this class, but, I feel like maybe they should have, because the Jets had cash to spend and they had clear needs with the offensive line and pass rush. They addressed the line with players, outside of McGovern, who have yet to prove that they are consistent starters. Retaining Jenkins was smart, but I think they could have helped him and gave the defense more teeth, if that makes sense, with another edge defender.
I think the Jets, when you look at them, I think they're one of those teams that can surprise people and win. They can be in any game. Like they can contend in any game. They're one of those teams. Do you know what I mean? Like I think I see them as one of those type of teams, and it all depends on how Sam Darnold develops. I don't know where Le'Veon Bell's head is. Like, I honestly don't. I don't know what he's doing. Like, is he really that invested in this Jets culture? So when I look at this entirety of their free agency, I'm leaning between B- and B. I mean, if we were being more generous, I would give them a B, because they did re-sign the players that they needed to, and they did branch out and get some playmakers that I can see developing into possibly stars.
Yeah, early in free agency, I was prepared to give this team a horrendous grade. But you go and then it's nothing, it's Fant, and you're just wondering, what are they doing? But then it's signings like Poole, Lewis, Jenkins, McGovern, Van Roten, Perriman, Owasso, and Desir, who we didn't talk about, who were both really underrated players that I think they got for cheap deals that'll work out. So I was really happy with the offseason and the way it turned out. I'm going to give it a B- just because I think there were things they could have done better, and there were a couple signings I didn't like. But I think a B- is still a respectable grade going from what they lost. I just think losing Anderson was really that upset me, because if you're wondering why Sam Darnold doesn't have any weapons and then you let his biggest weapon go, I just wonder, like, what was the reasoning behind that?
I don't know why everyone's that upset with Robbie Anderson. He's literally the most inconsistent wide receiver one I think I've ever seen. Like, he will go off and get you like 130 yards, and you'll be like, oh, off like 5 catches, and you'll be like, okay, maybe he can really develop. And then he'll like stink it up and go like 3 catches for like 23 yards. Like, he's that type of guy, and I really don't see. I didn't like him in that system, and honestly, I think Perriman is a lot better than him in terms of upside and potential. And I really don't know what they should do in terms of draft, because I think if we look at it, really, like, receivers are available there. Like, I mean, tackles, like, I feel like this O-line isn't going to get that much better if you sign draft Jedrick Wills. And I don't think he's going to, make that big of a difference on this line unless you go out and unless these guys can develop. So I think receiver is a possibility here. I really don't think,
I feel like they're going all in though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they will. But if I was the GM, I wouldn't rule out drafting a guy like Jerry Jeudy or CD Lamb. I think they could really do some serious damage with Sam Darnold. And I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Darnold, but I think if he had a type of receiver like that, I mean, who knows how much his stock would rise.
The big thing is in this draft, the second and third round wide receivers are so good and so deep that I just can't see them taking him 1 at 12. They do have a second and 2 third-round picks, so I could very easily see them trading back up into the late first round to grab maybe a Denzel Mims or a Justin Jefferson. I can very easily see Joe Douglas doing that. What I can't see him doing is passing up a franchise tackle at pick 11.
Can you really say that Mims or Justin Jefferson is a number 1 receiver, though?
No, but I don't think they need to be.
I think the Jets do need that. I think their biggest needs are wide receiver 1 and tackles. I think you're making, and I think it's less of a risk to take Jeudy or CD in terms of what.
Here's my thing is you're always talking about how the most important things are tackle, coach, and quarterback. And if they have an opportunity to grab a tackle, which Sam Darnold hasn't played with his entire time in the NFL, why wouldn't you do that now and then work on wide receiver later? Offensive line is way more important than wide receiver.
I agree with that. Like, I know O-line is important, and I'm always one of those guys to say, like, okay, O-line over the flashy receivers any day. But I think in this particular situation, when you've invested a lot into this O-line, I think adding another piece, another guy who has to learn the system, another guy who has to gel with these guys, another guy that Sam Darnold has to communicate with, I think it is a little bit too much this year. And I think next year they can still easily get a tackle. But I'm totally, like, literally, if they took Jedrick Wills, that's a great pickup. They took Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb, I'm totally fine with that also. I think they have a lot of potential with that pick.
Yeah, they can't go wrong, in my opinion. I'm perfectly fine with any of the guys that people have been talking about.
Unless they take Derrick Brown, then okay, you gotta look to fire Joe Douglas.
Yeah. All right, now let's move on to the NFC East. What do we want to start with? Cowboys?
Yeah, let's start with the Cowboys. Dak Prescott has been the primary storyline in Dallas this offseason, but the Cowboys have had to make major decisions. They spent a lot of their cap space on Amari Cooper, who signed a 5-year deal worth $100 million. Am I right on that? I think I am. Prescott, meanwhile, received the exclusive franchise tag as the two sides continue to negotiate that long-term contract extension that he wants. Clinton Dix is a solid signing. Dallas will be his 4th team in the last 3 seasons, but I think he'll allow the organization to focus its draft on other needs instead of safety. Gerald McCoy is still a pass rushing asset despite being 32. He's a strong replacement for Malik Collins. The area of concern for me is at receiver and edge defender. Cobb was the 3rd most targeted pass catcher last season, and Quinn produced as a pass rusher with 11.5 sacks.
Yeah,
the Cowboys did. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, so the Cowboys, I really didn't like what they did. I mean, like, they just didn't. They gave money to Cooper. They gave top 3 money to Cooper, which they had to do in order to keep him. But is he really worth Michael Thomas's money? No, we can all agree. No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, he's a number 1, but he's been inconsistent and he hasn't produced in the 4th quarter. And I've watched countless times Skip Bayless on FS1 just rant about Dak Prescott and his contract. I think they're gonna have to overpay. They know it. Dak knows it. Dak has the leverage here. They're going to have to give him his money. And frankly, I would do it because Dak Prescott has shown he can win. He hasn't shown it yet as much in the playoffs, only winning 1 playoff game out of 3. But I think he has the upside to do well for Dallas. And playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys is a very big responsibility, and there's a lot of pressure. And I think he's responded pretty well to it. And he's also a people's guy, so I think they'll get a deal done. But in terms of their signings, I mean, the only ones I liked were Clinton Dix and Gerald McCoy, because Clinton Dix, he's good. He just feels like more of an asset in trades and stuff. He just feels like one of those guys. But, like, he is a serviceable safety, and I really don't have a problem with it. With the Cowboys, it's like their losses concern me. Like, Robert Quinn is a big loss. I've always liked Robert Quinn, and Travis Frederick. That's a huge, huge loss that people aren't talking about as much. He's a top 3 center. He's an all-pro, consistent Pro Bowler. He's one of the big 3 on that line, obviously Zach Martin and Tyron Smith. And out of the 3, he's been the most consistent in the last 5 years, and that is a huge, huge loss. Because think about it, the center is the quarterback of the offensive line. He communicates with Dak Prescott and all that. And now with a loss like that, he's still – honestly, I think he would have probably been in the Hall of Fame if he kept it at this rate. Like, he would have probably gotten, 5 more Pro Bowls or something like that.
I applaud the Cowboys for bringing back their big three this year. No one thought that they'd be able to bring back Jalen Smith, Amari Cooper, and Dak Prescott, and somehow they managed to do that. But I also think that losing Byron Jones, losing Robert Quinn, and then even going and losing the best center in the game, Travis Frederick, really knocks them down. But I liked some of the other deals they made. Gerald McCoy was a good prove-it deal for him to come in as a veteran option on that D-line. I didn't think Dontari Poe was a terrible signing. Bring back Sean Lee is good. Greg Zuerlein fixes the need they had really all year. But then they also had some other signings, like signing Blake Jarwin to that deal. I wasn't a big fan of that one.
I wasn't a fan of that either. And also,
I didn't like the Anthony Brown signing.
No,
because I looked it up.
It was okay.
No, I looked it up. He only played 282 snaps for them last season. That's not that good. Especially with the money they gave him. I don't know.
It was probably the most inconsistent offseason for any team. They had a lot of things I liked and a lot of things I just didn't like. And it was just really random. It seems like when they lost someone, they try and make up for it by signing someone else. But it was really wishy-washy for me. I'd probably grade it a B, but I'm leaning a little bit towards B-. I know giving the Jets a B-. I don't think that the Cowboys and the Jets had the same.
That is very generous.
That's generous.
I'm giving them a D+. And
what?
Okay. That's not so generous.
I am not even. I'm maybe C-, but I am firm on D+. I did not like what they did. Like, Gerald McCoy and Dontari Poe are good in terms of a 4-3, but like what? I mean, it's not going to replace the loss of Robert Quinn. I'm sorry. And this team, the only reason I wouldn't give this like a D or an F is because this division is just so inconsistent and so wide open all the time. And they were able to keep, like I said, the 3 most important, right, quarterback, coach, and offensive line. Obviously, Frederick was a big loss, but they kept Dak Prescott, at least for the time being. Unless he holds out. I don't know what the situation on that is, but he is the team leader. We all can agree. And if you're able to keep him, that is a big deal. I think Mike McCarthy's got a lot on his hands with this team. I mean, maybe C-, D. Like, I'll be a bit generous and give him a C-. I really didn't like what they did. Like, besides Clinton Dix and Gerald McCoy, I mean, Sean Lee has literally been the definition of hurt. Like, he just never seems to be healthy. And I didn't like the Blake Jarwin deal as well. 4 years is a lot for him. I don't think they addressed the needs that they needed to. And I think Randall Cobb is also a big loss. I didn't touch on that, but I think that's about 800 yards of offense gone. So when you look at this team,
why would you put them below the Patriots grade-wise?
Because I think with the Patriots, like I said, I trust Bill Belichick more than anyone. So I'm not going to give him a bad grade in the sense that the Bill Belichick just finds a way, dude. Like, I can't bet against him. But with this Cowboys team, it's like, you know, with the team that America's team, all this pressure on you. And honestly, I think they're going to take a step back. I don't see, like, the loss of Frederick, I think, is what led me to give them this grade. It's not their fault. It's just him retire. Like, it's a huge deal. Like, I mean, Luke Kuechly being gone for the Panthers, but even the Panthers were on a big slope of decline. But for the Cowboys, I mean, they were looking upwards, right? Like, we can all agree they were trending in the right direction. They've been consistent, a playoff contender consistently. I mean, these are some big names that we're talking about that they lost, who have been a big part of their culture, and they haven't even shown that they're going younger. Like, where do I see any young pickups that they've got, or any, transition to good young talent? They're just trying to maintain what they have. And what they have, I don't believe, is a Super Bowl contender. So I would give them a D+, C- because of that.
I'm gonna find the middle ground between the both of you. I'm gonna go with a C. The Cowboys needed to bring back Cooper and Prescott, both of whom would have been basically impossible to replace in the offseason.
I don't think Cooper was a necessary keep. I don't think so.
I think they needed to bring him back.
The problem with
they
that
could
is
have used his money
a lot to trade for him. It would be a waste if they traded for him for a year and a half.
I know what you mean, but like, his money, he's not worth $100 million.
Okay, but see, after Cooper and Prescott, after that, like, I think their moves are just way harder to appreciate. Allowing Jones to walk was understandable. They only had, so much money to shell out, but adding a cheaper option other than Anthony Brown would have helped address their need at the position.
They should have gone after Brian Poole.
And you combine that with their losses at receiver and edge defender, and with the retirement of Travis Frederick, who was their franchise center, and the Cowboys have less talent than they did last season. So I'm going to give them a C.
All right. Now let's move on to the New York Giants, a team that was a lot less active than the Dallas Cowboys, not even close to as many signings. But they did tag Leonard Williams, and they signed James Bradbury, two moves that, to be completely honest, I wasn't a big fan of.
Let's see. New York Giants. I think the New York Giants had around $79 million to spend heading into free agency and plenty of needs to fill. James Bradbury was the marquee signing. He will be a huge upgrade at corner. Then they went to work on the linebacking core. David Mayo was re-signed after a breakout season in 2019. He has proved to be a valuable run stuffer who needs to improve in coverage, basically. And they also brought in Blake Martinez to play alongside him. It was a worthwhile move to bring in Kyler Fackrell. He had a down year with the Packers, but he recorded 10.5 sacks in 2018. And franchise tagging Leonard Williams ensured that the Giants will see their investment through after they traded for him in October. The Giants, they shouldn't be too disappointed with who's leaving. Daniel Jones is the heir to Eli Manning, so his retirement was accounted for. Mike Remmers was not good as a starting tackle, and his replacement, I think it's Cameron Fleming. He's 27 years old with some upside.
I think when we look at the Giants, the Giants, I actually wasn't that, mad about it. Like, I didn't really see any. I wasn't like, oh, this is as bad as the Cowboys. I think honestly, they did better by not doing as much because they didn't go after. New York, it's always the pressure of the Big Apple. Like, they do expect you to go after these big names, and obviously Giants fans are mad. But I do like the Blake Martinez signing. I think that was great. That was the highlight. James Bradbury, I absolutely love from Carolina. I don't even think they overpaid for him. Some people are saying that. I think it was a decent deal. And they didn't go after these big names, and they've kept their. I really don't know their trajectory because, they already spent a lot on the O-line last year, so it's like you can't do that this year. And in the draft, I think they're most likely going Simmons, but now that they spent in linebacker, what are they going to do? I don't know. Maybe Becton. For
me, it's either edge rusher or offensive line help.
Yes,
and I think they're going to go O-line.
But they've invested in both. They've already invested in both. No, I think they'll go back.
They didn't invest too much.
I think they'll go back to net 4 because I don't think Simmons will be there.
You think Detroit takes him?
Becton, I think I'd go Jedrick Wills.
But Slay is gone, right? Slay is gone, so I think they'll go Okudah and then Giants take Simmons, right?
I don't know. It's interesting. We'll get into the draft more later. Talking about the Giants, I think they signed a lot of overrated players. I love Leonard Williams. He's overrated. And James Bradbury's had some good games, but he's overrated. Same with Blake Martinez. Has a lot of tackles, but he's overrated. And I think that the Giants just brought in too many of those guys. And I wasn't a big fan. I really wasn't a big fan.
No, I'm going to disagree.
3 years, $30 million is not bad at all. I think Joe Schobert got a bit more because I agree he's a lot better. But
I don't have a problem with the numbers of the contract. I just have a problem with bringing in Blake Martinez in general. I think Danny Trevathan, Nick Kwiatkowski, Joe Schobert, you just mentioned, all better options than Blake Martinez.
But think again. I think all of them were taken. I think all of them were taken at the time.
They should have gone after those guys. What I'm saying more. Corey Littleton too. They have a lot of money. They were supposed to be the big players of the linebacker market, and Blake Martinez is, I think, settling.
I don't know what Dave Gettleman is doing. I genuinely can't.
He has no direction.
Yeah, I don't see where they're going. And this is a team that's a storied franchise, right? They've won 4 Super Bowls. They had the best defensive player of all time in Lawrence Hill. They have a history behind them, and I don't know. In these past few years, ever since that 2016 playoff run, they just haven't been the same. And I don't know where they're going here. I don't like their moves, but they did have some that I like. I know, Jack, you didn't like them, but I like the Blake Martinez and I like the James Bradbury signing. So in terms of grades, I gave them C+, B-. I'm borderline on that. So, depending on which way you want to go, I think I'm leaning more C+. You guys kind of convinced me just based on the direction. I don't know where they're going, especially even in the draft now that I can't see where their trajectory is heading. And I mean, they brought in Dion Lewis too. Like, I mean, Saquon can do both. He can catch and run. So I don't know where Dion Lewis would even fit in this system. So I think I'm going to go C plus B minus, but more C plus.
I'm going to go with a B. I think the Giants earned a positive grade for me because they made some impact signings. The defense should be better next season because of their investments. It is, however, strange to me that they didn't spend more of their money on an edge rusher and offensive line help, basically. Those were the two biggest areas of need other than linebacker.
And that's why I think because they already spent hella last offseason in offensive line.
Yeah, in my opinion, those were just the two biggest areas of need, and they will enter the third phase of free agency and the draft just still looking for help in both regards.
Yep. And again, that's why I'm B minus C plus.
As much as I didn't like their signings, I didn't beat them down too badly. I gave them a C. I just wasn't a big fan of who they brought in. They brought in positions that they needed, and they got back Leonard Williams, which really salvaged what was already a terrible trade. If they weren't able to bring him back, that would go down as one of the worst trades I've seen in the last couple of years. But I wasn't a big fan of who they went out and got at the positions they needed. I don't think Bradbury is as good as people peg him out to be. And I think that Martinez is settling at a linebacker group in free agency that was pretty good. And I think that the Giants could have done a lot better. So I'll give him a C. I wasn't a huge fan, but it's also not one of the worst of the entire period.
Okay, but before we go on, I just wanted to ask you, Blake Martinez Packers didn't have that good of a linebacking core, and I think Blake Martinez was still able to produce. So I don't see why it was a bad signing.
I don't understand exactly.
I don't think it was a bad signing
by produce, because I think that he stuffs the stat sheet with tackles, but in coverage and just overall, he's not a great linebacker. I think
run support, yes. Run support, yes.
Yeah, but sometimes that's not the entire problem. The problem they have with Alec Ogletree is he'll get a couple picks a year and people will think he's really good, but really he's terrible in pass coverage. Now they have a group of linebackers that still can't cover in pass coverage. It's just, I think that's not the type of linebacker they needed.
But see, your pass rush can salvage that. So with the Packers especially, right? The two Smiths were able to kind of salvage that, Horace.
So that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen in New York, though. Who do they have to rush the passer?
I think Leonard Williams can take a step up. I still believe
he didn't have a sack all year.
No, I know. He had a pretty bad year, but I think he still has some potential left in him, and obviously he hasn't produced. But I think he can still work. I think he can still produce in this system, and obviously we didn't get a lot of him last year because I don't know. I think it was around the deadline when they traded for him.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we didn't get to see much of him anyway, but I think now with a more kind of step up role, okay, you have to do something with this team. I think he can produce more.
All right, should we move on to the Eagles?
Yeah, this brings me to my favorite team of this entire offseason, at least in this division. I really liked what the Eagles did. They brought back Jalen Mills, who was their best corner, and they had a lot of them as free agents. They brought back Rodney McLeod. They signed Javon Hargrave, who will now make up the best D tackle pairing in the league. They signed Nickel Roby-Coleman. They traded for Darius Slay, and they didn't lose a whole ton of important pieces except Malcolm Jenkins. I really, really liked what the Eagles did.
I agree. I actually agree. You've convinced me, Jack, because I had to think about it a little bit more. I was planning to give them a much more weak grade, but I feel like I actually did like what the Eagles did. They missed out on James Bradbury and Byron Jones, but they pivoted and they got Darius Slay. The investments in the defense weren't really focused on the secondary, though. As you were saying, Javon Hargrave added some bite to the front. He was a consistent force for Pittsburgh. The Eagles let Malcolm Jenkins walk, but they're planning on playing Jalen Mills more at safety, I'm pretty sure, which is a creative way to keep Mills and give him a chance to provide value while making up for the departure of Jenkins. Rodney McLeod also became an important piece of the puzzle with the club's decision to let go of Jenkins. The losses primarily occurred on offense, but all of them will be easily remedied. Jordan Howard was largely a disappointment, and Vaitai was a swing tackle. So I actually do like the Eagles offseason as well.
So, yeah, you convinced me too. I literally forgot about the Slay trade. That's why my grade was so low. But now it's a bit higher, but I think I'm still unsure about what they're doing because I mean you guys all know EDP, right? Like he was so bad about the offense, like the lack of offensive help, and I still think they can get a solid guy in the draft at receiver, and I don't like they need to help out Carson Wentz, like please. I mean, I love Carson Wentz. I really think he gets hate for no reason. He should have an MVP in his resume right now. Like it really pisses me off, but I think in terms of what the Eagles did, I'm iffy. I love the Jalen Mills silent. I think that was my favorite thing. I think but he does have some big shoes to fill. The loss of Malcolm Jenkins. I'm one of the biggest Malcolm Jenkins fans, and I think the loss of your leader on defense, like in terms of spiritual and the guy who kind of rallies the team together, that's a huge loss. Like that is huge, especially for that team. Javon Hargrave was a good signing. I think the Eagles just their lack of offensive, like the lack of like recognition on offense or the lack of attention to detail on offense was a bit concerning for me, considering the Eagles always have they've always had a defensive kind of identity, except with McNabb and Owens that one year. But I didn't like how they didn't address they're still lacking at running back. I don't see like Miles Sanders, but
I think Miles Sanders is going to be very good this year.
I like him. I just don't know yet. Like I don't see him as a number one yet. I think he can be. And obviously I like Boston Scott too, but I just don't see what they're receiver, like what there were options. I don't understand why, like, okay, yeah, you can get someone in the draft, but like, I mean, I think they should go after Henry Ruggs maybe, but like their core is just really weird to look at. Like I like Greg Ward actually. I actually kind of like him, but I mean, Jeffrey's kind of, up and down, injury prone. Deshaun Jackson, same thing, injury prone always. I mean, Greg Ward is the guy I kind of like too, but I mean, where do you go from there? Like, okay, if you get Ruggs, like, does it really make your team that much better?
I think it would.
Out of all the three, I think Ruggs would be the best fit. And especially with their pick, I think they have like 16th. I'm not sure, like 17th or I think it's like top. There, It's 15 to 20 somewhere. So you did convince me though. I was initially going to give them a really bad grade, but I think the addition of Slay was also very big considering the lost Darby. And I think he can really fill in for them. I wouldn't say they did as good as what you're giving them. In terms of grades, I think I'm gonna give them a B plus, maybe. Like I think maybe even B. Like the lack of offensive help just concerns me, so I'm gonna give them a B.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give them a B plus. Yeah, I'm gonna give them a B plus. I think Slay and Hargrave, they just kind of anchor that positive grade. Both should have a big impact on the defense next season in a division that's basically up for grabs. We can all agree on that. Yep. They earned points for staying out of bidding wars for Howard and Vaitai, who, in my opinion, weren't worth the prices that they would have needed to pay. And releasing Jenkins was a bit of a head scratcher for me, but if the team has confidence in playing Mills at safety, it makes sense. So I'm gonna give him a B plus.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, even some of the signings we didn't talk about, like Nickel Roby-Coleman is one of the best slot corners in the league, in my opinion. I think that, and then also getting
he can get away with any pass interference.
But also getting out of Aguilar's contract and not paying Vaitai and not paying Jenkins, like that, there are a lot of good moves in there. I'm going to give the Eagles an A. It would be an A plus if they signed Perriman or Anderson, because that team needs speed. And seeing what those two got from their respective teams, I think if the Eagles paid that, I'd be seeing this as easily the best offseason, in my opinion, of any team. I wouldn't say best.
That's a bold statement.
That's a pretty bold statement. But like, I agree. I forgot to mention that the lack of speed at receiver, like Deshaun Jackson he's not getting any younger, and I think Perriman would have been a great fit. But guys, watch out. I think this team could be pretty good, and I think Carson Wentz is going to take a big step next year. I've always been a fan of his, and even though he doesn't have the help now, I'm really hoping they assess it in the draft. And if they do, just watch out for this team. I think they easily win this division.
Yeah, Ruggs or Jefferson with their first-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's game over. I think that would just be exactly what they need, because you saw what Deshaun Jackson did when he was healthy. He flourished in that offense.
He was doing – he had like two touchdowns, I think over 100 yards his first game, and everyone was thinking like dang, like is he back to his old form? And then obviously injuries derailed him. But yeah, this team, I can very well see them going, 10-plus wins easily. I think this is a team – this is definitely a Super Bowl contender. A playoff contender at least. And I think Carson Wentz, though they haven't helped him as much in the offseason, I'm really hoping they do in the draft. So yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with a B here, but they have a lot of upside in the draft.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Redskins. The Redskins had a lot of under-the-radar moves that aren't getting talked about very much. I liked the Kendall Fuller deal a lot. They tagged Brandon Scherf. They got Wes Schweitzer, Ronald Darby from the Eagles, who, while he's a little bit iffy, can be good and has upside. They got Thomas Davis to come over and play for Ron Rivera again. I liked what the Redskins did. Not as much as the Eagles, but it was still better than most of the teams in this division.
Totally agree with that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the Redskins' reputation for overpaying in free agency is well earned, but the Ron Rivera version of the team, I think they're off to a strong start in that regard. Kendall Fuller's 4-year, $40 million deal was the team's biggest financial commitment, but I think that was understandable given the market. And the team is familiar with Fuller from his days in Washington before he was traded to the Chiefs, and Rivera has proved that he is good with defensive backs. Outside of Fuller, the team shopped in the value aisle, basically. Thomas Davis is a Rivera guy, if that makes sense, and he'll bring veteran leadership to the defense. Kevin Pierre-Louis he has upside, but he was stuck low on Chicago's depth chart at linebacker. Tagging Brandon Scherf wasn't cheap, but I feel like it was necessary. He's capable of elite guard play, and the team has to protect Dwayne Haskins next season. So, yeah, I thought they did pretty good.
I agree. I liked what the Redskins did. I still think they should go after. I think they should honestly go after like Cam Newton or Winston, because I think Haskins. Keep in mind he only played 1 year as a starter in college, at Ohio State, and I think people kind of jumped on him too quick. Like I think he's still learning. Like honestly, I think maybe he should sit another year and maybe develop under like a Cam Newton or a Jameis Winston. Or even an Andy Dalton. I think they should go after a quarterback here, and they can really do some serious damage because they have one of those grit and grind rosters. And I think this does kind of count in free agents. I love the addition of Ron Rivera. I love that pickup. I think that's great for them. So I think when we look like these signings that they've had, Logan Thomas, all these, small guys that they're not going to jump out on your paper, but like Thomas Davis, I think was a really good one in terms of veteran leadership there. He can, help develop like John Bostic, even though he's kind of a veteran. He can still learn from Thomas Davis. Brandon Scherf is arguably the best guard in football right now after the retirement of Marshall Yanda. I think when you guys talked about it, I wanted to talk more about Kendall Fuller. Like he has experience in big games. Mm-hmm. He knows his role, and especially in the Super Bowl, I think he had a pretty good game. The Redskins, I think, look to me as like a team that's gradual rebuild. I think they're taking it slower than like the Dolphins are, who are trying to go a bit on a faster pace. They're taking it slow, and I think that's fine. Like I honestly like they keep in mind too. I forget if this was last year. So when they had Alex Smith, they were 6-3, and I well believed that they would win that division that year. This was when the Cowboys won it, I think, with like 9 wins or something like that, and obviously Alex Smith had one of the most gruesome injuries I think I've ever seen. So they still have a lot of that core left. So I can see them winning. Like I think we can all agree. Maybe their ceiling is like 7-9, I think, but that's still like a good 7-9. You know what I mean? Like, and I think in terms of what they've done, I would give them a solid D. Like I liked what they did. I think they could have. I think if they can get a quarterback, I would move my grade up to an A-A, because again, I think quarterback and offensive line for me just increase or decrease a grade by a lot. And they just need to they're taking it slow, and I think that's fine. But I think in the draft, I think we all know where they're going, Chase Young. So, it just depends on what they're doing later rounds and how they can gel this whole thing together, like Rivera's first year. I think it's going to take them at least 2 years before they're really a contender if they keep this up. So I'm going to give them a B.
Yeah, if you look at this team based on comparison to last year's 49ers, I don't think that there is a better comparison in the league. You're going to have a team that has a lot of first-round picks invested in their defense. They have a decent secondary. They're going to have a rookie pass rusher who is easily the best in the draft class. They have kind of some under-the-radar signings from a year before. I think this team could could be pretty good next year. I'm not going to say they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be a good team, especially if Haskins takes that next step. I really like
that's my problem. I don't know if he can take that next step this year. I don't think so.
Yeah, no,
I think
neither do I. But I think once he does, this team, they have the pieces in place for them to succeed. I'm going to give them an A- or a B+.
wow.
Just because I liked what they did. Like we didn't even talk about Peyton Barber, who they absolutely robbed with like one of the cheapest contracts I've ever
see, like
seen.
Darius Geis. I mean, I think they only did it for depth because Geis gets injured a lot.
Exactly.
Peterson's old. But yeah, I like the signing. I didn't think it was bad, but I think they should let Geis develop more as an RB1.
Yeah, I liked how they're gradually like how you said, unlike the Dolphins, they're gradually going into this rebuild, and I think that they're just going to keep building themselves up with Chase Young and whoever they draft in the second round. Like the second round picks are really important in this year in the NFL, especially when you're picking second in the second round. Like that's pretty much a first round caliber player, especially in a draft class this year that's really stacked.
Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna give him a B, just a solid B. This is a good, not great batch of signings, which might be the best news of all for the Skins. You both touched on it. They didn't try to turn the team around in one offseason, and they instead opted to remain flexible. And with the vast majority of, the headlining talent spoken for, the Redskins have the third most cap space in the league. That may be more important than the team actually doing a whole lot to get appreciably better in 1 year. So now the team needs to focus on building through the draft and spending on talent worth keeping around rather than fix things in one offseason. So that's why I'm going to give them a solid B right now.
Yeah. Overall, there were a couple teams in this division I wasn't a big fan of, but the Redskins and Eagles had a lot to like, especially for me. So we're going to have a lot of episodes coming out to you guys over the next couple of weeks. We're going to do this for all the divisions. You'll see every team's grade. We don't really have a whole lot to do anymore. So we're going to try and get a lot of content out to you. Please stay safe. We'll see you next time.